Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a wildly complex and deeply intertwined set of issues. We're looking at a fascinating political broadcast where intense global security challenges collide directly with highly emotional, high-stakes transitions right on the floor of the U.S. Senate. There is a whole lot to unpack here, from the Middle East all the way to domestic voting laws, so let's just dive right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We've got 4 main stops. 1. Foreign policy in the Middle East. 2. Transitions in the Senate. 3. Global sanctions strategy. And finally, 4. Domestic policy and elections. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, Foreign Policy in the Middle East, specifically navigating Iraq and Iran.
So recently, there was a highly critical meeting at the White House between the U.S. president and Iraq's new prime minister, Ali al-Saadi. You might be wondering, why does this specific meeting matter so much right now? Well, keeping a strong relationship with Baghdad is absolutely vital for American security. The broadcast really emphasized that during these ongoing tensions with Iran, the U.S. relies heavily on its military bases and airspace inside Iraq. The main diplomatic goal here is essentially keeping Baghdad separated from Tehran's influence, basically preventing Iraq from just becoming a proxy for its neighbor.
To really understand the stakes, Senator James Lankford pointed to a very specific and honestly staggering number: 47. He stated that for 47 years, Iran has been attacking the United States through various means and proxies. He characterized the situation not as a stable peace at all, but rather as a really shaky ceasefire. He noted that historically, Iranian forces have crossed right into Iraq to train militants and facilitate attacks using improvised explosive devices against Americans.
And this geopolitical concern isn't just staying in the Middle East, it's spreading. While we're used to hearing about targeted attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq or naval tensions in the Strait of Hormuz, Lankford alleged that Iranian proxy activity is pushing right into America's own hemisphere. He highlighted Iranian pushes into Venezuela and, pretty alarmingly, reported that there are hundreds of drones down in Cuba, complete with Iranian trainers. That literally places a potential threat just 90 miles off the coast of Key West. It really shows how interconnected regional conflicts have become on a massive global scale.
Moving on to Section 2, Transitions in the Senate, remembering Senator Lindsey Graham.
You know, to truly grasp the mood on Capitol Hill right now, amidst all these global challenges, you have to hear this incredibly somber description from Senator Lankford. He described walking onto the Senate floor and seeing Senator Lindsey Graham's empty desk, covered with a black drape and white roses. It is a stark, grounding reminder of the human element behind the massive political machine. Graham was a ubiquitous figure, known for his self-deprecating humor, his constant world travel, and his absolutely fierce advocacy for his political priorities. In the wake of this tremendous loss, Senator Graham's sister will actually be sworn in to take over his seat. She's stepping into what the governor of South Carolina described as a non-political caretaker role. But the timing could not be more intense. She is inheriting this seat, literally sitting in her brother's chair during an incredibly busy season. The Senate is currently dealing with major appropriations bills, plus navigating the very foreign policy crises regarding Iran that we were just talking about. It's a monumental transition happening in an absolute pressure cooker moment.
That brings us to Section 3, Global Sanctions Strategy, focusing on the Russia-Ukraine proposal.
A major legislative focus right now is a Russia sanctions bill, which was actually one of Senator Graham's final, passionate legislative pushes. The core belief driving this bipartisan strategy was summed up by Senator Lankford, who noted that Graham was a vocal advocate for the U.S. relationship with Ukraine and that he fundamentally believed he could help bring a real resolution to the conflict through strategic legislative pressure.
So what's the actual game plan? The speakers laid out a pretty straightforward 3-step logic for the bill. Step 1, you place heavy sanctions on the countries actively buying Russian oil and natural gas. Step 2, by doing that, you shut off the massive flow of money going directly into Russia. And Step 3, without that revenue, you dry up the Russian arms supplies being used against Ukraine. Interestingly enough, this strategy was directly inspired by the perceived success of the U.S. oil blockade on Iran. They're essentially taking a tool of American diplomacy from the Middle East and attempting to replicate it in Eastern Europe. And finally, we shift gears for Section 4, Domestic Policy and Elections, specifically looking at the Save America Act.
It's quite striking, but on the very night he passed away, Senator Graham was actually discussing the Save America Act with the U.S. president. As the chair of the Budget Committee, he was trying to find a way to pass portions of this act, which heavily focuses on voter ID requirements, using budget reconciliation.
For those who might not know, that's a special legislative process used to bypass standard filibuster rules. Senator Lankford pointed out that since this year's primaries are already over, they aren't aiming for the immediate election cycle anymore. Instead, they're pushing to get these rules locked in for the 2028 election.
And when we dig into this domestic debate, it really boils down to this exact number, 14. According to Lankford, there are currently exactly 14 states in the U.S. that do not require any form of voter ID. We have a stark contrast here across the political battleground. We literally have 36 states that currently have voter ID laws and 14 that do not. Advocates for the Save America Act, like Senator Lankford, argue that expanding this requirement to those remaining 14 states is just a reasonable step. They claim the vast majority of Americans see absolutely no issue with showing ID to prove citizenship when voting.
But of course, this reveals a deep partisan divide. Senator Lankford claimed that 4 years ago, Democratic opponents in the Senate attempted to break the filibuster, specifically to eliminate voter ID entirely across all 36 states that had it. So that history really sets the stage for the intense, ongoing legislative tug-of-war we are seeing today, as advocates try to push the legislation in the exact opposite direction.
So wrapping up this explainer, we are left with a massive question. As a grieving Senate welcomes a new caretaker into its ranks, how in the world will this legislative body balance these incredibly aggressive, high-stakes foreign policy strategies in the Middle East and Eastern Europe with these deeply entrenched, heavily divided domestic election battles right here at home? It is a complex web of policy and politics. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.